Let's just jump into this. Here's a great question. Would you comment on the kneeling during the anthem issue? How many of us have been wondering about that? I've seen it a couple times. Or the Seahawks response on 9/11.
Yeah. So here's one. It's a few things at play there that we have to grasp, right? A few things at play that we have to grasp. One, I find it astounding at the type of anger people threw at it, right? Like a few months ago, we applauded the life and legacy of Muhammad Ali. He made his name and fame outside of the ring for his protests. Now, granted, America fell most deeply in love with him when his Parkinson's really settled in and the sting of his bite was taken away because of his disease, and then he was just a lovable, toothless tiger. But we celebrated the life and legacy of how he was a principled man and what he stood for and all of that, right? We play the clips, ain't no Viet Cong ever killed me, right? We play those clips and ain't no Viet Cong ever called me nigga, right? We celebrated all of those all of those things part of his legacy, but then when it happens today, there's like shame. Now, where it's not hypocritical, people were harsh on him then when he did it. The part where I just find it wildly hypocritical is that now we used to be harsh on him about it, but then at the end of his life, we celebrated him for it. And then when someone inspired by his actions does something, we knock him for it. So it's like we're kind of like talking out of both sides of our mouth there. I lived in San Jose. I got to go to, I did some ministry at San Jose State a few times, and right on San Jose State on the campus, there is a statue for John Carlos and Tommy Smith, for the infamous black fist during the Olympics, right? There's a statue there where you've got they're on 1 and 3, and the 2 spot is empty, so you can actually stand there and do it, right? We've memorialized what was a protest. This was during the national anthem being played as they were celebrating a gold and bronze medal at the Olympics. That was a form of protest, and we celebrated. I read a fascinating article about how even the Aussie, who came in second place, how he was also doing his own form of protest during that, because he was wearing a pin. He didn't do the fist thing. He was wearing a pin that was standing in solidarity with him. And when he got back home to Australia, he was ostracized, and he died in relative obscurity, even though he was he should have been a national hero, but because he stood to stand. And then there was stuff written to celebrate his life and legacy based on what he did. So we have a history of protest, specifically with the image of the flag as the target of the protest that we have long celebrated. But then when it's done, we knock it. Now, here's what I'll say about that. It's okay if you don't like that he did it. Right? It's okay that you don't like what he did. Totally okay. I think it would be un-American to be mad at you not liking it. It would be un-American to protest, to be mad at you protesting his protest. Right? But the part that I also think is un-American, is to say he's a bad American for his protest. I mean, this is a country founded by people protesting the taxation of Europe by taking tea bags and throwing it in the water. Protest. We could get into all the protests that was happening, especially during the civil rights era and all of that. Now, the other thing that is odd to me is that we get stuck on what he did. We get stuck on what he did, not why he's doing it. A friend of mine had a statement to jar people. He would say, there are people, and I'm not going to say it for the sake of sensibilities here. He said, but there are people who are effing sleeping on the street and dying of hunger tonight. And your only problem with that sentence is that I said the word effing. Right? We are bothered by his form of protest. And if you are, that's fine. I had someone who's becoming a fast friend of mine. His son died in combat. His son was killed in combat, killed in action. And he said to me, one thing for sure, though, even though he firmly disagreed with what Kaepernick was doing, one thing he said for sure is that my son was still here right now. He'd say, hey, I fought for his right to be able to do that. Now, the thing that I hope we can all get past is why he did it. Why did he do it? He did it for a reason. He did it to speak up against injustice. Now, I've heard people say, how dare he speak about injustices? He's this privileged athlete who gets paid millions of dollars to not even do his job well and has this platform.
Amen. Oh.
Right? And he has this platform and he takes this opportunity to do that. Like, yeah, how dare this guy who has a privilege leverage his privilege for the benefit of others? How dare him? How dare him let this mind be in him that was also in Christ Jesus, who thought equality of God was nothing to be grabbed, but rather lowered himself. What do you do when you have privilege? Jesus showed us that the thing that we do with it, there was no more privilege. Forget white privilege. He had holy privilege. He had divine privilege, right? He had the privilege of omniscience. He had the privilege of being omnipotent. And he leveraged it for our good. Now, was that the best way to go about getting his point across? I don't know. Maybe not. But as Billy Graham once said, I like when they asked him about altar calls. Like, is this the best way to lead people to Jesus? He said, I like my way of doing it better than your way of not. And so is his way the best way to bring up to highlight the plight that people are dealing with? I might like his way of doing it better than some of our way of not.
Word. The question a couple of you have asked that's similar to this is this. It's good to see the church, even white evangelicals, engaging in the conversation about racial justice and reconciliation. A criticism levied by my friends who are not Jesus followers is that they see conversation but no action. What best can the church do to promote racial reconciliation and justice? Something that is also asked in other ways. Woodinville's not very racially mixed. How do we help that in this type of community? What does that look like?
There's a few things that you can actually just one step, one foot in front of the other kind of steps. Some of them are micro steps. Some of them are macro steps. On a micro level. And this is something that I counsel a lot of pastors about, because we'll get into discussions about, like, they'll ask me, like, diversity, come on, right? So and they'll even hear some of the how-to folk, right? Like, so if I want diversity, I need to go hire a black guy, right? Because that's the sexy thing to do right now. Let's hire a black guy, right? And if I could tell you some of the stories that I dealt with when I was interviewing for positions across the country, like, we really want to hire a black guy right now. Why? But they would tell you, you need to hire to staff. You need to, put them on your, what's your staff? What's your stage? Or two of the areas. Like, who's on your worship team? You want diversity. Who's on your worship team? If your stage is all white, church is going to be all right. Like, and I get that. Those are some good, valid steps. But there's there's a step you have to make before that. Before you set the stage, before you set the staff. This is bad alliteration here, so just go with me. Though it's not going to start with an S, but dinner table. You want to engage. You want to engage in the discussions. You want to engage in the talks. You want to engage in diversity. Who's coming to dinner at your house? Like, again, we all have the friend, right? But, like, what's their kid's name? They're a friend. What's their kid's name? When was the last time their kids broke one of your kids' toys? Right? Right? You friendship is tested right then. Like, she stomped on my Etch-a-Sketch. Like, it's broken, honey. You're gonna replace that, right? No, yes, whatever. We'll talk about it. It's okay, right? Like, what's your dinner table like? When just go over their house and, hey, you might. you might eat something that's a little different to you. Like, what's this big piece of fat in the greens here? Like, oh, these are collard greens. I don't know what a collard green is. I would like t-shirt greens. That has to be collard greens. I don't know. That was my dad joke for the night. I'm sorry. Right, but right, but what's I don't know what they said they were making chili quillis tonight. They're making chili quillis tonight. I don't know what to bring. That's chile quile. Okay, that's what's for dinner tonight. And yes, it's going to be a little different. Are you comfortable? Are you comfortable with that? No, but guess what? Do it anyway. I don't know what kind of music to play when they come over. Play something and we'll make it all awkward together. Right? Like what's your dinner table like? And then what conversations are you having? Like I'm gonna encourage all of our Anglo friends, and then I'm going to challenge, for once, I'm actually going to challenge our non-Anglo friends tonight. I'm going to challenge our Anglo friends. Wade into that messy, uncomfortable, I don't quite know how to say this conversation. Yeah, I don't know how to, I feel like I want to say the wrong thing. You have no idea. If it's someone that you're developing a relation, like don't walk up to the guy in Fred Meyer and do it.
I need a black friend. Will
Right?
you come hang out with me?
Right? I really like Drake. I do. Like Highline Bling. Right? Like don't. Or this, right? This one, like you. This is one I see all the time. Don't do this. Okay, this is a challenge, but I promise I'm encouraging you in a second. Like don't. Hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Hey, my brother. What's happening? Yeah. Like you can't do that and then turn around and say, "Oh, I don't see color." Yes, you do. You just shake my hand. It's okay. I promise, it's okay. But engage in the uncomfortable, I might not get this right conversation. I'm going to say something stupid. You might. But if it's someone you're developing a relationship with, you've built up the kind of equity where they probably know you're a little bit awkward, so it's okay. It's okay. Enter into it. Your attempt to enter into it is that just the attempt alone is going to close so many gaps and build so many bridges in a relationship that were there. Now, to my non-Anglo friends in here tonight, your Anglo friends are going to begin to engage in a world, in a dialogue that is foreign to them that they've never entered into before. Cut them some slack. Show them some grace. If you know you've already started to develop a friendship with them, you know they didn't. It's two ways you could take the question. You could take it that they are a raging, hard-hearted, Confederate flag-flying racist, or they're awkward. Assume it's the latter, not the former. Cut them some slack. If you could take it the wrong way, don't. Show them some grace. Never had that conversation before. They don't know whether to call you black or African American. And you're African, so they really don't know what to say. Like, you're African in America. Are you African American? I don't even, no, black. Like, just safe. Yes, permission. Black. Safe. Okay? Safe. Especially if they're not African American. Black, safe. Right? Safe. Cut them some slack. They don't know. They haven't walked through what you've walked through. They didn't sit in the living room with you and your uncle came home with a boot mark on his back because of the altercation that he had with law enforcement that day. They didn't get followed around the store assuming the worst. They didn't have somebody clutch their purse and get to the farthest part of the elevator when they got in, like it happened to you. They didn't see them and assume that the kids that you're with are actually from a marriage. Like oh, how many kids? Is that all your kids? Or you got some other ones somewhere else? That hasn't happened to them. They don't know your world. And you know, and I know, your world is messy. Theirs is too, but in a completely different way. But they're stepping in a brand new kind of mess. And they're entering into that. They're not entering into that to try to appease some strange foreign sense of white guilt. They're doing it because they're trying to love you well. Cut them some slack. You know and I know your name is spelled in a very different way. Don't get mad when they don't know how to pronounce it. It's different. It's different. It's okay. Cut them some slack. Show them some grace. Or it will never get better.
Good word. Another question here for you. It seems many people dismiss the concern of police violence against blacks in light of what they refer to as black-on-black violence. What is your response to this type of question or comment?
Let me get it straight. Let's not talk about things that are happening to them at the hands of those who are supposed to be protecting and serving them. Let's not talk about the broken systems that are supposed to serve them, but rather perpetuate their problems. Let's not talk about the laws that are written with their ill will in mind. Let's not talk about any of that, right? Let's not talk about authority hurting those they are supposed to be helping, because this is happening. Let's not talk about drunk driving. Let's not talk about drunk driving, because people run over their kids in their driveway. Let's not talk about texting and driving. Let's not talk about texting and driving. What about? I mean, look at all of these people. Look at all of these people who've been. How come nobody's testing? Smoking weed and driving. I don't want to talk about texting and driving. Look at these people smoking weed and driving all the time. I don't want to talk about that, man. Come on. We can't. Why? Tell me why. Tell me why we need to be worried about gun violence in America. When the child is kidnapped, is usually by someone in their own family. Why don't we deal with that problem? When a woman is killed, it's typically it often happens in the form of domestic violence. So why don't we deal with the domestic violence issue before we start talking about texting and driving? It makes no sense, does it? Let's not fix a problem because other problems exist. That makes no sense. I mean, if we want to talk about, and then there's this whole black on black. How come black people are the only people that have the crime that's the crime that they commit against themselves are the only ones that's actually designated to be that particular kind of crime? You know who kills most white people? White people. So where's the white on white crime? You know who kills more people from India in America? Actual Indian Americans? You know who kills more than anybody? Indian Americans. You know who kills more Native Americans than anybody else in America? Native Americans. Statistic. The most crimes that happen against white people in America are by other white people. Because they live together. They're in the closest proximity to one another. So by nature, that's what's going to happen. So yes, black on black violence happens because, by and large, blacks are typically congregated in the same place. Now, if we want to really dig into that, how about we talk about a history of redlining in communities, on why black people have to stay in those parts. And then the laws and the systems that are set up are often set up to enhance the people around those areas, but not the people in those areas, right? We want to
define redlining just for a second, because I didn't understand that until we talked recently as well. So as hard as to say, it's something important to the black community, I think.
Can I to put it? I mean, to put it real simply, red line. You either stay within here or you stay out here. You're not welcome in this part. Do some history. Do a little bit of digging on the history of Seattle and why the neighborhoods in Seattle are designed the way that they're designed. Did you know that the charters of the neighborhoods in the city of Seattle were often created with racial exclusion in mind? Black people can't live here. Black people can't live here. So, Central District was formed. Asians can't live here. Asians can't live here. So, the International District was formed. Italians can't live here. Italians can't. So, right, and on and on. You know, that's the history of the city of Seattle. And that's amazing because this isn't like a New England town where there's, you know, it's 300-400 older than America itself, right? Seattle's a pretty new city with regard, you know, just with American history in mind. It's a pretty new city, right? But the hopelessness that's provided, you can only, people respond to what they're in, right? So like, people came home from Vietnam and were given money to be able to go buy a house, but they weren't allowed to buy them in certain areas. So you can't buy a house here, you can't buy a house here, you can't buy a house here, you're only forced to buy one here. Oh, we're not putting any industry in that area. Oh, we're not putting any systems to support in that area. Oh, now you're all poor. Where the good teachers aren't going to that area, so now your education's bad. What's life look like for you in 2-3 generations of just that? So some of the quote unquote black on black crime, which again, everybody's crime is whatever on whatever crime, mostly. How about we deal with the broken systems that feed into the perpetual cycle of hopelessness? You put a business in that neighborhood and then promote nobody who actually lives in that neighborhood.
Not to put you on the spot too much because this wasn't part of our Q&A, but have you seen other forms of kind of what we call systemic racism within the culture at large that you've experienced, or maybe even more that the black community just assumes that the white community has no idea what they're talking about?
I mean, even the whole idea of a systemic racism is something that a lot of people would like reject. Mm-hmm. But so like if you're in business, you know the culture of your organization and certain successes of your organization, both good and bad, have happened ultimately for it to be sustained. It's a product of the system that's in place. Right? It's a product of the system that's in place. We want an open culture here at this organization, and we want it to have like kind of a flat. We want it to be open and everybody's close to equal. So we're not going to create a system with tons of layers of management. They're all employees and everybody's got a team lead. That's our culture, so we can say open. And we're not going to have walls. We're not going to have walls. It's going to be open space. We're going to have tables out here. It's going to be really collaborative. And even if you go to Facebook, like we want to be open. So Mark Zuckerberg's office, where he has all of his meetings, is literally, they call it the fishbowl because it's windows all around, and you're just walking down the main area in Facebook because it's like a college campus. You're walking down the main area, and I walked down, and I looked, I'm like, Zuckerberg's in the meeting right now, and I'm looking at it. Like, yeah, man, we have an open culture, right? The system is designed to support the culture, whether intentional or unintentional. So if you're in sales and you have a sales business, you say, hey, we want to be really good at onboarding new customers. So when you go to our website, our thing for existing customers is this little button way up in the upper right-hand corner, and everything else is designed for new customers. That's a system that you create because you want a culture where new business is welcome. We want a culture where feedback is welcome. So you put feedback cards on the table, and you have a button on your website or on your app or whatever, a line that you can text, because you create systems to support it. Now, you also notice that when you create those systems, there's often a byproduct that happens of stuff you don't want. We want an open culture where there's not a bunch of hierarchies of leadership. There's one team lead. So then, wait, we're noticing we need to change a little bit, because in this big, open, nebulous, nothing is getting done. There's confusion on who needs to go to who, because we don't have job descriptions here, so I don't know who actually to go to. So I show up to work every day. I collect my $90,000 a year, and I wait for something to show up on my desk so I can do the work, because until then, I have to wait for everybody else to get done. So, hey, that's just until everybody else does their part, I just kind of wait. That's kind of a negative byproduct of the culture that you've created, right? You see this in your office, some of you, yes? Yes? Now, if that's true of business, why don't we think that that's true of our society? That there are systems set in place that either intentionally or unintentionally, I'm not here to debate its intention or not. If these systems were designed to intentionally support and uphold systemic racial bias, or if it's completely unintentional. However, they exist. Like we complain about I grew up in the crack era. We complained about the drug epidemic that was happening, and there was Reagan really turned up the war on drugs that Nixon started, right? Like they really ratcheted it up. Like this is a war on drugs. Now, what's even funny, from the beginning, the war on drugs, according to a Nixon staffer, was created because they saw the black vote starting to swing the other way, and they saw drugs starting to be kind of a thing in the black community. So as a way to suppress the black vote, they created the war on drugs. So in order to prevent the other guy from winning elections. Racial bias, system created to keep them down for their own gain. Not because we think black people are evil, we just want to win, and we got to use them as a pawn to win. Racial bias for my gain. Reagan ratchets it up. Say they got Nancy Reagan on TV, say no to drugs. Right? DARE started all of that, but then we see this epidemic of drugs starting to pour in, especially this particular community in California, in LA. Drugs flying out of the place. Only to find out the drugs get into the community because the government was taking the drugs, selling, getting the money into the black community, skimming money off the top so that they could fund the war that they were fighting in Central America. Not conspiracy theory stuff. Look up the Kerry papers. John Kerry. Look up the Kerry papers, right? And who goes to jail for that? Right? Freeway Ricky Ross and a bunch of other people, they all go to jail for that. Does Oliver North go to jail for that? Does anybody in the Reagan organization go to jail for that at all? If you were around, you remember. No, they didn't. But it's public knowledge that they were actually the ones doing it. Pumping the money, pumping the drugs into the black community. The government. Skimming the money off the top so they could fight a war. Now, is this a system that's set up intentionally because we think black is bad and black and Hispanic is bad and white is good? No, I don't know. But is it the system that's set up? And then it perpetuates even more as Clinton comes on board and says, yes, absolutely, we need to crank up this war on drugs. So we are 3 strikes and you're done. Mandatory life sentences if you're on your 3rd felony, especially for non-violent drug criminals. You got busted with 2 pounds of weed. This is your 3rd time. You're doing life in jail. Huh? And they're still dealing with that. Everybody's like, why is Obama pardoning all these 200 people? They were nonviolent drug felonies. Don't tell me that the Stanford student who raped a girl in front of people can only do 3 months, but the guy busted with 2 pounds of weed gets life. Meanwhile, we set up an entire industry that they're not allowed to get into on the public selling of marijuana. So my uncle went to jail for it, and I know a guy who does trading who won't do it because of his principles. He's like, I don't believe that weed should be legal, but he knows people are asking him, help me trade public stock with these weed companies and their IPO because I'm trying to get rich off weed on the back end. Meanwhile, people from communities like mine are doing life. Is it an intentional system set up along racial lines and bias? Is it intentional? I'm not going to say that. Is it intentional that your company is terrible at customer service? No, but there was a system put in place in your company that makes you terrible at customer service. I don't think Comcast wants to be. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop. I want to stop. But my point is there's a system that supports a culture, be it intentional or unintentional.
Do you realize that I've heard this before from my white friends, and then I hear my white friends talk about how much that's a conspiracy theory. I don't know if you've heard that before, but I certainly have. And it's really interesting to hear from Steve, and not just from Steve, but is it fair to say that reflects a community belief in terms of what this is and what happened in the war on drugs and in redlining and the mortgage crisis of the 1980s and some of those crisis things that came into play with the Black community?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, so on the one hand, people in predominantly Black communities, they weren't allowed, they didn't have access. They did not have access to the places that will allow them to buy a house. So how do you fix that? Predatory lenders. Well, mortgage foreclosure is outrageous in predominantly Black communities. What is happening? Predatory lenders. That's what's happening. I was in the mortgage business. I know what a ninja loan is. No income, no job or assets. You got a credit score over 660? Yeah, you can buy that house that you absolutely cannot afford. We'll do interest only for the first 5 years. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Oh, you can't afford the payment anymore. I have no idea why that happened. Like, there were legit mortgage companies that were setting up in churches in predominantly Black communities to give them the hope of home ownership. Completely predatory. Completely predatory. Predominantly against people of color and older people.
We've got a few minutes left. Let me ask you another question here that's on here. There's lots of opinions out there on the problem and the solution. Who are the voices that you listen to? If we're looking for solutions info, how do we discern the helpful from the harmful?
Man, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't feel like I have a lot of voices that speak for me. I really don't. And I mean this across a broad spectrum, being a Christian, being Black. I don't feel like there are people who genuinely reflect what I believe, and how I believe it should be practiced in the public square. Partially because I believe that it's really hard, and this is something I don't think a lot of Americans want to hear. I think it's really, really hard, nay, impossible sometimes, to be a good Christian and a good American simultaneously. There are some things that are just, to not do it would be un-American for what America's supposed to be about. It violates the law, rule, and heart of God. And there are certain things that to do it would be the good Christian, yes, follow the Lord thing to do. But would not be good. I mean, Obama joked about it once, but he said, turn the other cheek is not a really good not a really good national defense policy. Right? So there's just certain things that I don't think you can do to be both a good Christian and a good American. So there are certain things that I believe about the role of social good, and there are certain things that I believe about the rule of law. There are certain things that I believe about um, life. That, I mean, quite candidly, that I don't think anybody is speaking for in any level right now. But specifically, they're on both sides. I got to compromise one. Got to compromise one for the other. I'm constantly finding myself, this thing is important. This thing is important. Which one do I compromise on? Well, this thing that's important, I don't believe they're actually going to even do it. So even if I compromise with them, I think he or she is lying. Simultaneously, I think he or she is lying when I compromise for this thing. So I've got nowhere to go. So there's not a lot of people that I think represent what I think the way Christian faith should be played out in the public square. So voices that I listen to right now, there's this great campaign called the AND campaign, started by Michelle Baraka Lewis and excuse me, a few other people that started the AND campaign as people of faith. They are they're saying they're and some of the ands that play it, like, I'm pro social good, and I'm pro social justice, and for the doing things that support the overall good of people, even if it's public benefit programs. I'm for that, but I'm also pro-life. I'm pro-life across the board. So I think there should be protections in the womb, and I think there should be protections out of the womb. The way our system is set up right now, it's either or. And with the AMP campaign, it's saying, no, we are AND. And they've even lined out some, like, hey, here's what we're about. Here are some laws we need to be pressing for, and here's some that are already out there that we need to be seeing get put into action. So I listen to people from the AND campaign, such like Michelle Baraka Lewis, Leonce Crump, who's a pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, Derwin Gray, who's a pastor just outside of Charlotte. Pray for them, because considering where they are right now, they're dealing with a lot. And he's kind of one of the people that they're tagging to say, hey, what can be done here?
I think he's on Good Morning America a couple days ago, wasn't he?
Was he?
I think he was.
Wow. Yep. I watch NBC. I watched the Today Show. Good Morning
I didn't watch
America,
it.
sorry.
I heard through grapevine. I follow him on Twitter.
Gotcha. So yeah, Derwin Gray. There's a few others, but there's only a handful. There's other voices that I listen to just to kind of understand hey, I don't agree with this, so who should I be listening to so I can understand it? Right? There's something like, I don't agree with you, but I need to know for sure why I don't. So let me hear you out. So there's quite a few of those, and you can pick any of the news stations. MSNBC, Fox, CNN. They're loaded with people to listen to just to see. Okay, I don't agree, but help me understand why I don't. Oh yeah, I really don't. Okay, thanks. I think Mark Lamont Hill falls in that category. Yeah, guy, I know what you're trying to get at, but no, I'm not feeling how you're getting at it. Sean King kind of falls into that a lot of times. I get it, but I don't I get it, but I don't get it. With him sometimes, I've kind of just taken the stance to say, hey, if he says something of value, somebody I know is either going to post it on Facebook or Twitter, so I'll see it. I don't need to follow him to hear it. So that's just a few people that I listen to. It's hard, because I feel like one, honestly, as a black man, I feel like I'm being pandered. Right? I feel like I'm being used. I feel like I'm a pawn in this big game that's being played, and I don't trust any of it. Like, oh, come over to the Republicans. Martin Luther King was a Republican. Like, yeah, but they've done stuff that has crushed people, not just people of color, just people. Oh, come to the Democrat side. We are for it. Like, yeah, but y'all, the 3-strike rule. Yeah, you did that. Right? I'm from Detroit. I've seen Republicans and Democrats in the state and city level ruin a city and then take turns doing it. You're doing a bad job, we're going to take it over. Well, you made it worse somehow. How'd you do that? Flint was the only city in Michigan worse than Detroit, and then you were going to take it over. Oh, wait, now you can't drink the water. Great. Well, that was a Republican. That was a Democrat. You took turns ruining that city. Good job. Good. Now they have to leave or literally die. Good job. So I just feel like there's not a ton of voices. Most of the voices, again, that I hear, they're not necessarily political ones. Most of them are pastors. They are pushing us to engage on a micro and a macro level. To say, hey, once you see what's wrong, once you get a heart for the pain, okay, now forget the president, call your senators, because you vote for them. Call your senators on the carpet. Find out what's happening for your attorney general and the stuff that your prosecuting attorney and the stuff that they're letting happen. Your district attorney, the stuff that they're just letting ride. Like, press them on that. Press them on that. That's a walk you can make. That's a vote you can make. That's a press that you can make before you even deal with the whole, presidential level. Will that make a difference? Won't it? I don't know, but I know that guy who's running. I have the power to put him. My vote literally matters, right? He can win or lose by 1 or 2 votes in this town, so that matters. So it's pressing them on that. It's finding out the laws that are broken, just parts of the system that are broken, and pressing on the things that come up that would support that, and the things that aren't coming up that can change that. And getting involved in that level, raising your voice, because the reality is, for people in America, people of color, by and large, right? I'm not talking about the guy who struggled and fight to make it, get through school. He's working at Microsoft. He's killing it, right? Like, not that guy, but probably his extended family. We don't think through, and this is a reality for me that I'm thinking through like now. We don't think through life through the lens of thriving. We think through life through the lens of surviving. I'm just trying to make it. So I don't have time to go down to City Hall and listen to the arguments that are being made about the laws that's about to pass. I don't have time to find out what this candidate or that candidate is against and it's for. Because we got to eat. I'm trying to time out when I mail out which check to make sure which one does and does not bounce. I'm trying to decide just which of the things that we value are going to just to be able to sustain right now. We think through the lens of survival, not through the lens of thriving. So there's things when you're thinking through life through the lens of thriving. Like, oh man, you need to learn how to save. Save? Jesus saves. I got $239 in my checking account. Like, I'm not thinking about saving. I'm trying to make it to Friday. And so when you're thinking through life through that lens, the things that you even want to do and get involved in for your own good and the good of your own community, you don't have the time or energy to do it. Who would speak for you if that's your reality? And if they can, why won't they? And if they will, when will they? I think there's no time like right now. But I've got some wild, not even controversial, I've got some wild, easy step thoughts that where the church is poised to be the kind of hope that the world needs right now. On a spiritual level with very practical implications. like wild, simple steps because of the gospel, because of Jesus. And I don't mean this on some, oh, you believe the social gospel. No, I believe the gospel. Right? I believe in the life, the perfect life, literal death, burial, and actual resurrection of Jesus. Martin Luther King didn't believe that was a literal thing. And even the idea of it was enough to spur, to get him going on actual action. He didn't believe in a literal resurrection. He thought it was a figurative resurrection. And even that idea was enough to spur the whole movement. But I mean in a literal resurrected Jesus. The implications of that for you and for me, for those of us who believe in and saved by the literal resurrected Jesus and those groups of people gathered together, the ecclesia or ecclesia, depending on who your Greek person was, right? The church gathered together, that body of believers, the implications of that in this world, because of that reality, are tremendous, and they are exactly our world, not just America, but what our world needs right now.
And to hear more about that, you have to come back tomorrow morning. The reality is that we have a lot to chew on, a lot to digest tonight and think about, and this is an ongoing conversation. This isn't a one-night event. This is going to last for a long time. There's two things I want you to know. Number one is we have lots of questions we didn't get to, and we have lots of things we want to continue to discuss. We will put this resource up on thegospelandrace.com in the near future. Probably within the next month or so, you'll see all the videos up from tonight's sessions, as well as some resources from Steve that he's going to give to us. And maybe we'll go through some of those question and answer. We might try to have him answer those things. There are about 15 questions on here I think we didn't even touch, so which is just because of lack of time. So that's number one. Number two is if you need prayer for anything tonight, please don't leave without receiving that. Or if you just need time to process, you can go through those doors in the back, and there's people from our prayer team who'd be willing to pray for you, pray with you for anything. There's a quiet room back there that you can take some time just to process and pray and think about these things. But once again, if you're going to be here tomorrow for 9 or 10:45 for our two gatherings, we'd love to see you here as Steve comes and gives us hopefully a vision of the kingdom of God, the holy other kingdom of God. I think a picture through Revelation chapter 5 or 7, right? It's kind of what we're going to jump into tomorrow, which is great.
As bleak as tonight was,
yeah,
like as deep in like, oh my gosh, we're without hope as we went tonight, that's how high we'll go tomorrow.
Yeah. Which
okay,
is beautiful.
so there is lots of hope and beauty and a glorious, I'm convinced, not like a glorious right now.
Yeah.
And a glorious future.
Yeah.